Hi, I'm Miss Tyler, and welcome to Context for Kids. New Gospel studies, New Testament studies. We're doing Matthew chapter 1, and this is lesson 6. And I know last time I told you that we were going to study betrothal and marriage and divorce in ancient Israel. And I read an entire tractate of the Mishnah Ketubot with the Kahati commentary, and I learned a lot. But then I found there are two other Mishnah that I need to study, Gittin and Kiddushin. Gittin means divorce, or it refers to the divorce document, and Kiddushin is the engagement, and Ketubot is the actual marriage contract. Actually, it's the money that was to go to a woman if she was divorced or widowed. But the name Ketubah come to mean the whole shebang. Anyway, I'm not ready for that yet, so we're going to go to something I am ready to teach, and that is the really interesting thing is, how did we get from the name Yeshua to Jesus? Because you probably noticed that I use both, because I want everyone to understand what I'm talking about. Anyway, this teaching is rated G, of course. It's names, it's grammar. It's not any grammar, it's letters, so everybody can watch. All right, so how do we get from Yeshua to Jesus? Okay, what does Messiah's name look like in Hebrew? Well, here it is, and we've got, this is the letter Yod. Now, did you know in Hebrew that you read it from right to left instead of left to right? You know, it's crazy. When I try to read Greek, I always try and read it from left to right. If I don't see R-like letters, Arabic script, I just can't do it. Okay, so we got Yod, that makes the Y sound. And this thing here that looks like a W with the dot over the top, that's a Sheen, and it makes the Sh sound. So we got Y, Sh. And this is a Vav, and usually, well, I don't know if it's usually or not, but a lot of times it is a consonant. But in this one, it's a vowel and it makes the oo sound. Sometimes it makes the o sound. Sometimes when it's a consonant, it makes the v sound. But here it makes the oo sound. And this is an ayin, and it's a silent letter, kind of like the silent e at the end of the word, except it doesn't do the same thing at all. And so you got Yeshua. Yeshua. Okay. So that's what Messiah's name looks like in Hebrew at the very end of the teaching. I'm going to show you where it says the Messiah's name will be Yeshua, actually, in the book of Zechariah. Very cool. Okay, so what does Messiah's name look like in Greek? And you're going, yikes, well, some of those letters kind of look like English, right? I mean, that's an I, right? That's an N, right? That's a O wearing a visor. No, that's an O. That looks kind of like a U or a V, and that looks like an S that just had a lot of trouble getting out of bed this morning. I was feeling that way myself. But it's Greek, and those letters are not I-N-O-O-U-B. S. It's not, and I'll tell you how to pronounce it later. But that and that are the same word, just in two languages with two different alphabets, and alphabets that don't have the same letter sound. Now you're going, Miss Tyler, I'm confused. Or maybe you're advanced and you already know this stuff. Okay, so anyway. So in Matthew chapter 1, we see that when Messiah was born, Joseph, his father, gave him the name Yeshua. That was the name the angel told him to give him. It says that's the Aramaic form of Yehoshua or Joshua. Now I bet you all know someone that's named Joshua. There's a good chance that in your family there's someone who's named Joshua. My oldest nephew on my side of the family, his name is Joshua. In the Hebrew, it's Yehoshua. And that's the short form of God's name. Yod He Vav He, the tetragrammaton. The four letters that represent God's name. Shua. So it's Yod He Vav He saves. That's what, see, every name in Hebrew meant something. They didn't have names like Tyler. Actually, Tyler does mean something in Old English, but that's okay. But I mean, it doesn't mean anything in Hebrew. You can look through the Bible in every language it's ever been translated, and you will never come up with my name, ever. But that's okay. I'm glad his name is in there. As long as his name and that name, yeah, I'm good. Everybody else, just icing, you know. Okay, so now when the Hebrew scriptures were translated into Greek, now we've talked about the Septuagint, and this was in the 3rd century BCE, so that was within the 200 to 300 years before the birth of Messiah. The Septuagint was translated by a group of 70 or 72 scholars, depending on who's telling the story. And it's called the LXX because if you know your Roman numerals, and I bet a lot of you do, LXX. L is 50, X is 10, X is 10. You add them up together, you get 70 for the 70 scholars. And Septuagint, the 70 No! No, that's not quite right. Okay. So the Septuagint used this. Now they would start fighting. I got the evil cat in here, hoping that if I kept her in here, she would not fight. Now she's fighting with her brother. So they used that, the word I showed you before, for the name of Joshua or Yehoshua. Okay? So Joshua, of course, was the person who took over when Moses died and led them in to the promised land. Joshua was one of the 2 spies. He was one of the only 2 spies, including Caleb, who didn't give an evil report about the land of Canaan. Okay, I'm going to have to stop them because they are shaking the camera. Howdy, there was some weeping and gnashing of teeth when I threw them out of the room. Hopefully they won't scream and scratch the door. Life with my husband's evil cat. What are you going to do? All right, so like I said, they translated the word Joshua this way, okay? That's also the way in the New Testament that we see Messiah's name translated with that. But that word is pronounced Jesus, Jesus, which is a long way from Yeshua, right? So how on earth did this happen? What the heck happened? How did you go from Yeshua to Jesus? And that was the way that the rabbis did it hundreds of years before Messiah was born. How could they get away with translating it with completely different sounds? Well, we got to talk about transliteration today, and we'll find transliteration all over the Bible. When you have 2 languages that don't... Oh, okay. Translation is what you do when you have 2 languages that have the same alphabets. For example, English and German have the same alphabets. Actually, English, German, French, Spanish, just most languages in the world, I believe, use the Arabic script. I mean, not like Arabic, but it's called, I can't remember what that script is called, but the way our numbers and letters are the way it is throughout a lot of the world. Okay, most times when you look at another language, not for most people, but most languages, I believe, you're going to see that, that's probably not right. Just forget I said anything. But what happens when Russian letters look nothing like ours? Chinese letters look nothing. Chinese don't have, never mind. Okay, different languages, and of course we've got Greek and Hebrew that look nothing like English. And the other problem is sometimes the sounds aren't the same either. When you have 2 different languages with 2 different alphabets And two different kinds of sounds you can't translate. You have to transliterate. In order to have something written on the paper, you can't just create letters. No one will know what they are, right? All right, so we try to translate sounds instead of letters when we transliterate because it's all we can do, okay? But like I said, sometimes the languages don't have the same sounds. In Greek, there is no Y sound, which was at the beginning of Yeshua. Well, what do? You have to translate the names. Well, we'll see on the next slide. And they also didn't have the sh sound. So Greek doesn't have y and sh. What did parents do when they were trying to get their kids to be quiet at night? There was no shh. What'd they say? I don't know. Maybe kids just got to talk all night in ancient Greece. I don't know. Maybe they stood up. Maybe they sat up doing the Pythagorean theorem and discussing Neoplatonian, ethics. I don't know. All right. So, I didn't replace this one. Oh, okay. Okay, so it's time to get creative. The Greeks could make a y type of sound, so we're going from Yeshua here, so they could make a y type of sound with some letters, the ones that look like I and N, which would actually sound a bit more like yeah, because that first was made an E sound and the second one made an E sound. So when you put E and E together, yeah. So it kind of sounds like yeah. Not exactly, but it was the closest they could do without creating new letters, which of course they couldn't do. Can you imagine everybody just creating new letters for sounds? That would be funny. Okay. Now, also, they couldn't make the sh sound, but they did have an S, so they had the S sound. So now, instead of yesh, in Yeshua, we have yes. It kind of sounds like yes! Oh, kind of. Now, they could make an oo sound. So now we have Yesu. And they also have an ah sound, so they could have gone Yeshua, but there was a problem with the language. See, the name Yeshua is male. And in the Greek, you have to have a sigma on the end of the word. You know that thing that looked like the S that was having trouble getting out of bed in the morning or kind of just fell out? If they kept the ah at the end of the name, it would be a woman's name. Yeshua would be a woman's name. I'm sure you've seen the names in the Bible. Apollos is a man's name. Julius, that's Roman, but you have the same ancient sort of naming things. So you've got Julius Caesar, okay? And I believe it was his daughter was named Octavia. Her husband was named Octavius. She got the S on the end of the male names and an A on the end of the female names. Well, if the rabbis translated the name Yeshua, they would be making Yeshua to be effeminate. And in those days, that was bad mojo. It was very shameful. You didn't have a man with a woman's name. Or a woman with a man's name. Like Tyler, for instance. They wouldn't do it. It was shameful. It was just... You knew who someone was talking about, whether there was an A at the end of the name or an S. I mean, in their sounds and letters. As a matter of fact, there's an apostle in the book of Acts called Junia, female. So, we know that because the other... Anyway, okay, so it would have been shameful for Messiah to have a woman's name. So what should have been Yeshua, under the best of circumstances, became Jesus. Jesus. So that's how we got from Yod, Shin, Vav, Ayin to Jesus. Are you ready? It's going to get a little bit more complicated. So now That was fine, but then the Greeks translated from, or the Romans translated from the Greek. And so Jesus, we have letters that look a lot more like ours, right? So we got the I, this same kind of thing, I, S. And then that's not a V, it makes a U sound, Jesus, Jesus. So it's not even Jesus anymore. When it came into the Latin, it was Jesus. And that looks an awful lot like Jesus, right? So we're getting there, but we're not finished because we're still at Jesus. In Latin and Germanic languages, Jesus was the way that Messiah's name was written and pronounced for like 1,000 years. So a long time. I mean, the Greek, you didn't read Greek unless you were a scholar. Most people couldn't read at all for those 1,000 years. It's the truth. Before, the printing press, people didn't even, people could go their whole lives without seeing anything except a wanted poster. And mostly they were just looking for the picture and the reward money. Okay? So, when people didn't have books, clergymen would tell the people how it was spoken, which is obvious. So, Jesus, for 1,000 years. Now, in 1526, the Tyndale Bible was printed. And the I at the beginning of Jesus was replaced by the J, which was a relatively new invention. And it caught on, and the V, which made the oo sound, well, in English it could also make the sound. And the S could make the Z sound, because Jesus just doesn't sound right. So it became Jesus. Very easy. And people say, well, what's wrong with Jesus? Well, in English you don't have, in Hebrew words, you almost never have the emphasis placed on the beginning of the word. You don't have Jesus. Jesus. You have Yeshua. Or, Moshe for Moses. You have the emphasis placed on the end or middle of the word. Not in English. In English, you put the emphasis on the beginning of the word. It's a harsher language because it's a Germanic language. Germanic languages are very harsh, and they place more emphasis on the beginning of the word. So we have Jesus. Jesus. And Jesus wouldn't, Jesus. Jesus is easier to say, frankly. So, that's the thing. Once people got Bibles in their hands, and people would read it, and it became Jesus. It's a long, complicated story, but it was kind of bound to happen in a time when people weren't speaking Hebrew, and probably most people who held the Bible never heard a person speak Hebrew in their life. And they didn't have the internet. They couldn't go and find out how people in other communities or other places, and even a scholar might not know. They might be able to read Hebrew perfectly fine. Doesn't mean they could speak it. Big difference. I can actually read Hebrew out loud, but it don't mean that I understand what I'm reading. Okay? Now, King James Bible. You've heard of the King James Bible, right? Well, did you know if you go on Google Images and you look for portraits of King James, you'll see it says King Yams. Because the J wasn't being really, the J wasn't there, and the J wasn't really being pronounced consistently. And in the King James Bible, when they would have Yeshua's name, there we go, right there. They didn't have Jesus. They had Jesus in 1611. So, there we go. I had it down there. Okay, so, like I said, it's tempting to be harsh with the translators, but the Greeks had no choice. Well, actually, the rabbis that translated into Greek had no choice. They couldn't make up sounds. They couldn't make up letters and then expect the people who were reading in Greek to figure out who the heck they're talking about or what sounds those. I mean, if you've never heard the sh sound in your life, how do you even describe it in writing? Think about that. If you don't have the y sound, just try and describe that in writing. If you can do it, I'd be very impressed without using, letters that didn't exist. Try doing it using only Greek letters that exist. The Romans transliterated from the Greek, and they had no reason hundreds of years later to suspect that the Iesus wasn't correct. And they didn't have the EA. They had, yeah. So, we live in an age of easy information. It's easy to judge people who didn't. We can hear people speaking from all over the world. They lived in a time without television, radio, record players, tape recorders. Unless someone stood in front of them and spoke something to them, they would never hear it in their entire life. And so even someone who traveled widely would only hear so much. So, this one's kind of funny. This one's a misconception that you see it out there on those memes and people, say something and they say that Jesus comes from Jesus because of the way it sounds in Spanish. Jesus. But I've already shown you that it didn't sound like Jesus. It sounded like Jesus. And Zeus is actually a modern English translation of the name of that god. The ancient Greeks called the king of their gods, oh jeez, you got to put a Z and a D together. Zeus. That doesn't sound like anything like Jesus, does it? Or it'd be hey Zeus. And later they called him Dios, Zeus, Dios. So, I've already shown you, we know where it came from. We have a paper trail. We can see it from the manuscripts exactly how it happened. No big deal. So we got a paper trail. You always, when people make a claim, they need to provide you with a paper trail. They need to show you when things happened and how things happened and why things happened. Okay? And we can show point by point over like 2,000 years exactly how we got from the Yeshua to Jesus to Jesus. From the Septuagint to the Tyndale Bible. Now we know why too, and it's perfectly understandable. Languages are crazy, especially in the age of non-information, and they were not living in the age of information. The important thing that we take away from it, though, isn't the pronunciation. The name Yeshua was prophetic fulfillment of a verse in Zechariah 6:11 and 12 telling us the name of the Messiah. Did you know that? Did you know that in the book of the prophet Zechariah, God actually tells Zechariah what the name of the Messiah will be? Let's read it. Okay, so this is Zechariah 6:11 through 12. Take from them silver and gold, make a crown, and set it on the head of Joshua, the son of Jehozadak, the high priest. Sorry, I'm used to not pronouncing my J's. The son of Jehozadak, the high priest, and say to him, Thus says the Lord of hosts, Behold the man whose name is the branch. For he shall branch out from this place, and he shall build a temple of the Lord. The branch is, I believe it's mentioned 5 times in Scripture, and the ancient rabbis all say that the branch, the netzer, is the Messiah every time it's mentioned. And so this one says, the man whose name is the branch. Now, Joshua, son of Jehozadak, his name wasn't the branch. No. His name was the same as the name of the branch would be. Joshua, Yehoshua. That's how it's rendered in the Septuagint. Jesus. Yeshua. They were telling us the name of the Messiah. Isn't that awesome? Isn't that awesome? Jesus, Yeshua, Adonai saves. Okay, so I love that. Now we're going to have our discipleship moment about being a true friend. And being a true friend is a hard, hard thing. You know, sometimes harder than others. But I want you, when I go through life and I look at the things, terrible things, and I've had terrible things happen, and you're going to have terrible things happen. People are going to hurt you. People are going to betray you. It's one of those things in life that just happens. But you know what? The wonderful thing is, every time somebody hurts you or betrays you, make a note of it. Not a note telling you to get vengeance. Not like that. Don't do that. I don't want you to say, Miss Tyler told me to make a vengeance list, so I'm making a list of everybody who's wronged me and I'm going to get them good. No. Make a list and remember that you never want to do what was done to you to anyone. You don't ever want to make anyone feel wrongly the way that someone made you feel. It's one of the most loving things that we can do is to use, because there are two kinds of people in the world really when it comes down to it. The people who have terrible things done to them and do those things to others, and the people who have terrible things done to them and never do it to others because they don't want anyone to feel the way that they felt. You know, people did horrible things to Yeshua. People did horrible things to a lot of people in the Bible. Those people were wrong. But God tells us that we need to make good out of evil. We need to make sure that the evil done to us doesn't get visited upon others. We need to stop the cycle. We need to be a good friend even when we don't have good friends. And that's hard because we're angry. And you're not always going to get it right. But you know what? It's worth keep trying to do. Anyway, so next week we're going to do betrothal and divorce and marriage in ancient Israel. We're going to talk about when Mary and Joseph were betrothed, what that would look like, and what it would have looked like if he had actually been able to divorce her. So anyway, I'm excited about that. And in the meantime, I love you and praying for you, and I pray you have a wonderful week studying the scripture together as a family. Bye-bye now.